Welcome to the Culture Design Show, where we feature conversations with leaders and thinkers who are passionate about culture and design. Now, let's get started with the show.
Steve Chaparro here. I am the host of the Culture Design Show, a podcast where I feature leaders and thinkers at some of the top creative firms in the world, including architecture, design, technology, and marketing. What's the one thing they all have in common? They all believe in the power of culture and design. This podcast is brought to you by Culture Design Studio. We help people and culture leaders who feel constrained in their ability to engage their employees to become champions of their people. Through a series of facilitated workshops, we provide a practical and collaborative process to transform the culture within your creative organizations. We've worked with organizations like Duarte Design, Design Thinkers Group, Red Bull, USAID, Bacardi, and the Office of Civic Innovation. If you're looking for more than just a consultant, but have someone to have come and facilitate your organization through a structured conversation to transform your culture, reach out to us. To learn more, go to culturedesignstudio.com. Oen Michael Hammonds is the IBM Design Principal for IBM HR. He leads the creative and brand direction of IBM Global Employee Experiences. Owen represents the leading technical design point of authority for HR brand and employee experience. He collaboratively guides teams across the global HR organization and beyond, ensuring that key employee experiences consistently and cohesively execute design to the highest standard. Additionally, as an enterprise design thinking leader, Owen's responsibilities also include expanding, maturing, and elevating the understanding and application of enterprise design thinking throughout the global HR organization. Also, for almost 4 years, Owen served as the president of the Austin chapter of AIGA. Owen, welcome to the Culture Design Show.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an honor. We are here actually at IBM Studios here in Austin. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I mean, after I read a little bit about you and we have some mutual friends, especially with the area of topic or the area of focus that you have here at IBM, I really wanted to have this conversation. So I'm honored that we can have a chat.
Oh, great.
I'm going to start from the beginning.
Okay.
And that's kind of like the beginning of Owen. So would just love to hear, I mean, where do you come from and what was it like growing up?
Oh, wow. That far back. Okay. So I'm originally from Kentucky, from Louisville. You can tell that by the way I say it.
Yeah.
And I started designing actually way back in high school, and I left it, went to the military. And after the military, went back to school, got my degree at Northern Kentucky University, which is right by Cincinnati, Ohio, just to give people a geographic reference.
Across the river,
Across
right?
the river, yep. So that's where I actually started my career in design. And did 11 years in the marketing, advertising, general design studios, working on a lot of consumer brand materials there. And for the past 13 years, I've been living in Austin, Texas. So I moved from Cincinnati to Austin and been at IBM for the past 6 years.
Wow.
And it's been probably one of the largest growing experiences I've had in my long design career. So,
yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd love to hear exactly how you came to IBM, but even further than that, like our love, say for those that are in design, that love for design started somewhere. We'd love to hear how that love was birthed in you, whether it was as a child, a teenager, or a high school student. Where did that love for design come from?
Probably from a couple places. One was from my family. I actually have a pretty artistic family, so it was just a love of craft. And you know, my brother is a great drawer, and my mom did several different types of crafts, and as well as my sister. So being brought up around that was probably like the starting point. And then about high school, I would say is probably like my first formal introduction into appreciating and understanding what at that time was really called commercial art, somewhat design, but more commercial art, where I was doing illustrations and different things like that for people's, materials, and appreciated how the reaction, not just doing the work, but just seeing the reaction of people enjoying the work that I was doing, whether it was an illustration or a t-shirt design for people in high school, and, different types of things like that that help people's, programs, whether it's like the Glee Club or whatever, different things like that. People started just connected the dots of like, oh, Owen could do that. Oh, Owen could probably, make us a brochure. And, I never really said no. And I never really charged people either, so that's probably why too. But just being, sought out to like help fulfill people's needs that they saw, and they saw value, and what design could probably do for their organization or their program, was probably my first insight into, oh, this is actually something that I should investigate further into.
And so before coming to IBM, what were some of the things that you were exploring as part of your design career?
So a big part of the exploration was, one, not just being in school, but also exploring what was happening outside of school. And that was AIGA. AIGA introduced me to a huge network of people and all the different opportunities and things that can be done in design. School was great, and I had great teachers because most of my faculty were adjuncts, so they came from the profession. They were bringing real world work into the classroom and a real world experience of, if you don't meet your timeline, this is the consequences. And those things are sometimes skipped over or not taught in the classroom experience. So it was great to have that type of experience and being exposed to those real world adjunct faculty, the AIGA exposure of like going to, meetups or attending lectures of, quote unquote, big name speakers that were coming into Cincinnati to, show their work and talk about their experience in design, just really opened my eyes to how big design is. It's beyond just the tools that we use in the day-to-day practice. It's really there's that whole quote like design won't save the world. Well, it probably won't save the world, but it will actually change it, which is a huge thing. Design has the possibility of changing those things, and being outside of, technically really my comfort zone, and like reaching out and finding those larger things that what design could do really helped me give me a insight to like where I could go.
Right. Yeah. And what were some of the types of firms that you worked at prior to IBM?
So I actually started at a firm called Benchmark, which eventually turned into Anthem Worldwide, which I don't know if they exist anymore now. But that's where I got my start at. And they actually hired me while still a senior in college. John Carpenter, who was the creative director there, came into my class, saw my work, and was really interested in me, working at Benchmark. And so that's where I got my start in. At Benchmark for 9 years. And then I actually moved to and that was a medium-sized company, about 50 to 60 people. And then I went to a small studio, Madison Design Group. Julie and Jackie were the owners, principal owners of the company, and they were actually some of my former teachers. And so that connection to my adjunct and being like a part of like reaching out and being a part of that network, they helped me get into that role there as well too. And that role really helped me, Benchmark was great in exposing me to the day-to-day practice of being a designer, and being at a small studio like Madison Design Group exposed me to what else is the part of being a part of small business, having to do all the things from production to trying to write copy to hiring illustrators and art directors. And so I got a much larger exposure to the roles and responsibilities of being a designer. And then from there, I actually went to, that's when I moved to from Cincinnati to Austin, Texas. And I actually started as freelancing around town just to get my feet wet and see what the market was like in Austin. And I eventually ended up at Y&R in Y&R for 6 years. So I did a lot from being in Cincinnati, doing a lot of consumer good work for Procter & Gamble, Bounce, Olay, Noxzema, Safeguard, like a lot of beauty care and home good type of work. Moving to Texas, I had to literally pivot my brain into working in this more technology space because that's the market here in Austin. And so working at Y&R, I worked on St. David's Hospital and worked on AMD and several technology, Samsung type of clients, and which was from B2B to B2C. So there was another pivot within that space as well too. But one of the things that I discovered in that pivot was like the needs were pretty the same, but it was just how you message your message to your audience was a little slightly different then. And so I was at Y&R for 6 years, and then I went from Y&R to IBM.
That's what I love about your background is that you have, especially if this podcast is at that intersection of culture and design, you had this whole life in just purely design in terms of the agencies that you worked at. What were some of the things at those agencies that you noticed about the cultures of either those particular agencies or just agencies in general? Are there some nuances about culture at agencies that we can learn from?
I think one of the biggest things, and this is an insight that I came across recently, was at each one of those places, at Benchmark, at Madison Design Group, at Y&R, at IBM, culture was in the hands of us as employees. And so and that may be a foresight of just having great leaders, and they didn't really want to dictate to us what the culture would be at those agencies and studios. If you walk around here at IBM, each one of these teams has their own different culture, and you can see it on the walls, how they set up their space, and that's created by them. That's not created by IBM as a corporation. That is empowerment that our great leadership like Phil Gilbert and Doug Powell have, like, go forth. This is your space. You should make it yours. You should own your space. And I think that's the thing that I've seen that's a dot connector with all of those different companies that I've worked for, is that the culture was created by us.
And that's great, because it's not always that way at agencies or at companies, especially mature companies, blue chip companies like IBM, where that autonomy to create sort of this micro culture within this meta or macro culture that is IBM. The fact that that's been your experience has been a wonderful thing, I would imagine, for you, because that's not everyone's experience.
Yes, definitely. And I think it attributes to why I stayed at certain companies
like
all those companies for so long.
I was going to ask you about that, because those have been very long stints for agency works.
Mm-hmm. And it's great culture, intentionally hiring not the best talent, but just hiring good people. And I've worked with so many great people at all those companies, and all those companies I left on my own were cognizant to help me grow further. It's not because, people leave a company because of a bad manager. All those companies, I didn't leave because of a bad manager. It's like I left because I saw an insight to help continue to grow.
What's interesting to me is that companies or agencies, that when people leave for that reason, it's not because they're dissatisfied, but they're leaving for a growth opportunity. In many cases, I've seen at those healthy cultures that there's almost like a celebration on behalf of the people that are still there of this outgoing person to say, hey, we're happy for you. We know that you were here with us. You're a valuable part of our team, but you will forever be an alumnus of our firm or of our agency. Did you feel that at those firms in some way?
Definitely. Some of those were, literal celebrations, and others are just kind of after the fact of how we interact with each other now that we are no longer together, and just having great connections to those leaders of those companies still. Some of them are still my mentors. Some of them still my, my sponsors or advocates as well too. And just having that great connection to them outside of, after I have left, it just reinvigorates me to know that we both left on the best note for each other then.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so now talked all about your career prior to coming to IBM. What led you to come over to the IBM side of things?
Definitely an opportunity for more growth. Texas, Austin in particular, is a technology city. And I was doing technology work at Y&R, and it was great work. But it was also, I kind of had reached a point where I didn't feel like I was growing anymore. And I was actually looking at, because I teach, my 9 to 5 is working and doing, design work, but I'll also teach at night. And I've been teaching for 15 years now at different schools. And so I was finding myself feeling more fulfilled when I was leaving work and going to teach than being at work and doing the work then. And so, and teaching is a healthy growth mindset for me, because to stay ahead of the students, I have to make sure that I'm on top of the latest trends, the technology, what's good design, what's bad design, so I can help them understand those things as well too. And the transition for me was going to be going back to school and then getting a master's degree and teach full time. But I also still wanted to stay in design, so I was on that fence of I think a lot of people go through this where there's should I go back to school and further my education in a particular area, or transition to another place to work at then. And it just so happened that IBM was in their transformation, where they had, hiring some of the great talent from across the country to start the formal design practice at IBM. And one of my contractors that I worked with had joined that effort, and she actually reached out to me. And it's hey, there's something going on over here. You should come and check it out. And initially I was very, very skeptical. And that's mainly because in the design industry, there was a stigma, or there's a stigma against, working in-house. You either work for the agency and do really, really cool stuff, or all these cool brands. And if you work in-house, it can be you're trapped. You can feel stuffy. You can feel that you're not really, no room to grow or do different types of things as well too. So I had definitely that at top of mind. And what I found was that doing that investigation, asking questions, finding who were those people that they were hiring, and lo and behold, I actually knew some of them as well too. And so I was able to get real insight to what is this formal design practice you all are setting up here? And once I, took a sip of the Kool-Aid, I kind of gobbled it up once I, really heard the story and heard met a lot of the people that were doing that, leading that practice here, like Adam Cutler, Doug Powell, Charlie Hill, and Phil Gilbert, of course, who's the lead, our design leader of this, transformation here. I was yes, okay, this is, let me fill out the application and sign up to see if I can get into this then.
So how far back did that that transformation began? How many years ago?
About 7 or 8 years now. So I've been here for 6 years. So yes.
And what led to the desire to embark on that huge journey? And I'd love to ask you as well, like what did that mean in terms of a transformation? What was it shifting from and to? But what kind of led to that transformation to take place?
So one of the things that happened was, we had a new CEO, which was Jenny Rometty, and she saw, the acquisitions that were coming in and the success that they were having. Is why they were acquired by IBM. And one of those acquisitions was Lombardi, which was owned by Phil Gilbert. And as a part of that acquisition, she's also, the company's also looking at, what are we doing as a company? How can we grow? How can we change? How can we stay innovative for the next 100 years here as well, too? And at that time as well, too, a lot of conversations were happening around how design can influence and help change companies as well, too. But there was no real formality around them. It was just like, this thing is happening. We know it's happening. No one really knows how to kind of really do it. In the case for IBM, doing it at scale, because we're big. And so with the Lombardi acquisition, there were some conversations happening with Phil and how he was able to be such a successful company. And it revolved around, using Agile as a framework, and also using design thinking to ensure that they were delivering the right product that people really wanted to use then. And so Jenny and Robert LeBlanc, who was one of the VPs at the time, is like, all right, Phil, what do you need to make this transformation happen? And so he's like, I need a place, I need people, and I need a framework to help bring these people together, and a practice essentially to help bring these people together to work collaboratively then as well too. And so that's where it all started. We started with a framework first. Yeah. Design thinking was the framework that we wanted to use, but most importantly, we didn't want it to be designer-centered. Right. We wanted to bring in developers. We wanted to bring in sales. We wanted to bring in product managers as a part of we all need to use this framework so we can all move at the same direction at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the misnomers, or at least misunderstandings about design thinking, is that they're asking people to become designers. And on one hand, it is you can adopt a mindset and methodology, but it's not necessarily saying you need to have the craft of a designer, but it's thinking like a designer. Was there like this master plan as to how that was going to be adopted at scale, or what did it start at a small level and then grew organically or strategically from there?
There was a plan. I don't know if you would call it a master plan, but definitely there was a note to all those founders and creators of our enterprise design thinking framework around the existing framework won't work for us. We're just way too big. And so one of the things that, that they came up with was, hills as a way to help the entire team understand what we're driving toward. Another part of that framework is sponsored users. Mm-hmm. How do we bring in the actual users of those products and services that we are creating to make sure we are hearing them, and that everyone is hearing the same thing as well too, as we are developing those products. And then also playbacks. How do we all tell a user-centered story that is centered around how we are solving the pain points, so that everyone on the team has a clear understanding of this is the pain point. These are how we're going to solve these pain points then. So we're not just having a meeting to have a meeting. We're actually having a very empathetic understanding of who our users are and how we are solving the problem for them as well too. And having those three key parts actually help us scale the design thinking practice then.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to nerd out, and I won't because I know exactly what that looked like. But I think for the sake of our audience, I think one of the questions that people might have or have had about design thinking, and how do you bring awareness about it? How do you apply it, at a very maybe sort of experimental way, and then how do you adopt it enterprise wide? What are some lessons that you've learned that you can share with other companies? I mean, obviously IBM is a huge company, and that was, I'm sure, a monumental task, and still probably is. But what are some things that you would recommend to leaders at companies that are trying to adopt design thinking as a method of transformation, a framework?
One big one is really understand, if you're wanting to make this transformation, understand what problem that you're trying to solve. A lot of people see, this is the new thing, and, they're doing it, so we got to do it. But we're doing it for a reason. And we're doing it because we've identified these problems within our company, and we did the research to try to understand what's the best way to, improve those experiences or create better opportunities as a company. And so I think people are too quick to jump on, using design thinking as a silver bullet to resolve a lot of those things. And it's you haven't really identified what the real issue is with how your teams operate, or identifying those different problem sets then as well too. Because I mean, we use design thinking, and we reinforce that it's a framework. So adopting design thinking the way we do it may be different for you. You may not need the whole shebang of how we are applying enterprise design thinking. You may need another part of it, or a different type of framework practice then as well too, to help adopt that. So that problem identification is a huge thing that companies should investigate first. And sometimes it's hard, even on the team level, when we're doing design thinking on our team levels here. I find some teams don't want to do that investigation because they just don't want to open up the truth that their product or service may not be the best.
And that can be for both team members as well as leadership as well. I mean, in order to adopt this framework of investigation, you're saying I'm open to whatever the outcome is of this process, even if it's something that I don't think is the answer right now. Like if I might disagree with it, at least with what I know now. And so there's definitely a vulnerability that has to be embraced as part of embarking on this process, right?
Definitely. It's that vulnerability and being humble to say that, okay, I can see that I'm actually hearing from my employees that, the way that we're doing work now it can be improved, or it can be better. Then how can we do that then? What will be the suggestions that we can take on that can start to improve that? The second part of that is adoption. And the other thing with design thinking is and I've seen this with design thinking and agile practices, where teams or whole companies are fire hosed with everyone stop. We're going to do it this way, and everyone's got to adopt it by this time period, and you're going to do it all. And it's whoa. It's and that tends to, stagnate teams because it's too fast. The expectation of turnaround is too much. And instead, again, identifying that problem and choosing the part of the framework that can help a team, slowly. It may be, let's just, instead of trying to adopt everything, let's just understand who our users are. Let's get a better understanding of who uses our product. Who are the real users of our product? And then from there, understanding like what are the key areas of opportunities to improve that experience then as well too. So it's slowly integrating and getting teams to adopt that framework versus you got to do it all and it has to be done within the next sprint. Well, I mean that you're setting your team up to fail then.
Right. I think that's the difference between design thinking being an order versus an invitation. An invitation to experiment with one small problem, whatever the problem might be. It might even be an internal or a team challenge, and say, let's try this. And to see the framework as a series of modules that even those modules can be pulled out and exercised on its own for a specific challenge. Like say, for instance, it might be, let's frame the problem. Let's use these exercises just for the sole purpose of making sure that we understand the right problem to solve.
Exactly.
Many times the lights go on just if you lead a team through that exercise and realize, let the process determine the outcome. It's so important. Is that some of the things that you've learned? I mean, I'm imagining that's what you're saying, right?
Yes, definitely. And this is one of the things that we're continually working on, because of the size of our company, there's still new teams that we're always onboarding. And we're also learning as well, too. It's like, oh, yeah, we onboarded that team that way. This worked. This didn't work. And so, when we're onboarding our next team, we're iterating and we're, okay, instead of jumping right into the work, to your point, it's like, let's make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of what problem we're trying to solve here. Like, how can we help them craft how might we statements so that we all agree upon, this problem statement and, take it up the ladder to our stakeholders and help them understand this is what we're trying to solve here so that we're all in agreement there.
So when you use that word, you used even that gesture of, like kind of raising your hand up as you're kind of going up the ladder of leadership. How important is the sponsorship of leadership in the adoption of something like design thinking?
It's so important that we actually created a particular badge that's called the Advocate Badge. And for our enterprise design thinking practice, we have a set of badges from practitioner, which is a general understanding of design thinking, co-creator. How are you starting to practice design thinking within your day-to-day work? Not in the workshop, but in your day-to-day work. Coach, how are you helping others adopt design thinking as a practice? And then leader, how are you scaling that adoption across your team, your business unit, maybe even your portfolio then as well too? And then the advocate, how can I advocate and continue to uplift my team to continue that practice? What is the language that I, as a stakeholder, a client, a leader, need to know so that when my team is talking in the language of design thinking, I understand? When they come to me and say, hey, we want to do a playback to you on this new iteration of this experience we created, I know that a playback is an empathetic, user-centered story that goes from the pain point to how we are resolving that specific pain point for that user then. And so in that creation of the advocate course, that is our way of, one, scaling, through that, helping, stakeholders and clients understand what is their role as advocates of design thinking then as well too. And also we can all hold each other accountable then as well too. I know that you're an advocate. I know that you're a coach. I know that you're a co-creator. I know your capabilities, or I know your responsibilities as well too, with that level of experience based off of you have achieving those badges then as well too.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's so awesome, so clear, so well thought out in terms of what each one level of understanding, application, and then being able to advocate for adoption. I mean, I think I'm gonna have to learn from that and incorporate some of that into my own language, because I think that's so powerful. I mean, I've done some work with the Office of Civic Innovation at one of the local cities in Southern California, And what they're trying to do is how do they foster a culture of innovation. And one of the things that I've counseled them on is on one hand, looking at 3 different roles that they might play. One is an innovation consultant, but a consultant is one who has the subject matter expertise and will do the work for you. But in many of the problems that particular city faces, they aren't SMEs, so they really can't act as a consultant. But then what does it look like to be a co-creator, where you're facilitating those conversations and equipping them? But then the third one is the coach. And so I love what you're saying. I think there's a lot that people can learn how to implement even in their organizations about what is the role that someone can play even within this framework of design thinking, but also the language. And one of the other things that I've learned at that city is many times people that are practitioners, we will nerd out on this stuff, and we can use buzzwords, and we can use language that only we understand. I mean, I come from the world of architecture. I mean, we use words like that people looked at us and thought we were on a different planet because, we were just using words that are not normal.
Right.
But we were nerd out. And I think the same thing goes for design practitioners. And I think too many times we can use those buzzwords to describe a process and people get turned off by that.
Right. Or they think it's more work that they have to do, or it's like, I just want to build something.
Right.
But how do we know that we're building the right thing?
But I think if we can look at framing the problem at the beginning so that it's understood together, but also describing the outcome, and who, in a sense, for our internal clients, who cares what the process is, as long as I get that outcome. So some of the things that I've done before is I've led, if it's kind of like a short turnaround, I've led them through design thinking sessions without telling them so.
Right.
We've arrived at this outcome that everybody's like very happy about, and they say, oh, by the way, I happen to use design thinking. Mm-hmm. And there's a light that turns on because it's not so much about what they hear, but it's about what they do, because it's a very learning by doing type of experience.
Yes, definitely. And that's one of the things that a lot of people, there's debates about, educating people on design thinking and the digital platform by themselves versus, that one-on-one or that team experience of us going through that together. And I think there's a hybrid in there. There's a level of, let me educate you on, the best practices of design thinking, and how to, what are the positive patterns of great design thinking, and what are the anti-patterns of that then. Yeah. But then, all right, so I understand this now, so let's try something here. And going into that with the mindset of it's iterative. We should be doing things in a low fidelity so that we're not trying to spend a lot of time building this really nice experience, and then all of a sudden we put it in front of the user. It's like, this is not what I need. It's like if we build like a low fidelity prototype, then I can get feedback and pivot on that feedback quickly, because I didn't spend a ton of time on building a high fidelity version of it as well too, and continue iterating on that until I get to that higher fidelity. Right. Then. And that takes practice in a team setting with all of us together. We like to call it radical collaboration, where teamwork is about a set of designers or a set of developers all moving toward that same end product experience or goal. Radical collaboration is the designer, the developer, the operating manager or the product manager, the HR professional, all moving together collaboratively to achieve that goal then. And that's that huge difference that design thinking helps us bring. It creates that common language, which, what we've been referring to, but it also introduces that our team needs to come together. We can no longer be doing waterfalling work down the stream until it becomes whatever. It needs to be all of us are, what's that old teamwork poster of like all of us in a canoe together,
rowing together in the same direction. So, I mean, I feel like so far we've created a foundation for what I'm really, I mean, like I said, I'm nerding out on everything we've talked about so far. But this podcast is about culture and it's about design. So how, in your current role, if you can explain to us, what is your current responsibilities as design principal over employee experience?
Yes. So I have several responsibilities. One of the main ones that I do on a daily basis is ensuring that working within IBM HR is ensuring that we are helping translate design thinking into an HR space. And so our team works on helping with that translation, with that, of translating how design thinking framework can work within the HR space and work within how these teams work as well too, because all teams are different, and so we try to help and advise and consult those teams on that type of work. So there's a level of education of around design thinking, but also how do we advise on practice then as well too. Another part of the work that I'm doing is craft. How do we create simplified user experience services, products, and offerings that don't get into the way of that do not get in the way of the employees' day-to-day workflow then as well too. And that is, one where design thinking help us identify what is the real problem that employee is going through with using one of our experiences. The craft part helps us understand what is the best way that we can design that experience then. So it's not about necessarily teaching design craft to non-designers, HR practitioners, and HR professionals, but it's helping them understand what is a good simplified experience. How can we make this a user-friendly experience so that the IBMer can do? They know what they know what you're asking. They can do what you're asking them to do, and they can continue and get out of that experience so they can go back to do their day-to-day work then as well too. Then.
So how would you describe or define the employee experience?
So we can define the employee experience as everything from before joining IBM all the way to exiting IBM, and everything that's in between those two. Because if the employee experience or the potential employee experience starts before a potential candidate joins IBM, how are we introducing ourselves to them? How do they understand what IBM is, what IBM does, and what IBM values are as well too? And if we convince them even in that potential introductory story of who IBM is, what is that recruiting experience like? Is it usable? Is it simple? Can they complete the things that we're asking them to do as far as filling out the resume, filling out the application, turning in a resume, in a simple experience? Those things, they haven't joined IBM yet, and if that is a horrible experience before they even join IBM, then we're already setting the tone of how they may think and feel about IBM before they're hired at IBM then. And after that, once they've joined, what is their day-to-day? What is their work life like at IBM? What are those things that they have to do at IBM that are HR related, as far as making sure that they understand what their roles and responsibilities are, making sure that they understand what is your career trajectory, what is your performance like, what is that experience of making sure that we are creating an experience around a culture of feedback, that you understand what your goals are and how you're being measured then as well too. Those are enablements that HR should be providing in an IBMer's career, however long they're here, to ensure that they understand that this is how I can grow. These are the things I need to improve on. And these are the possibilities of where I can go within a company as well too then. And then exiting, like what is that exit experience like? Do I understand? Am I, if I'm leaving because I'm retiring, what is that experience like? Am I leaving because there's maybe, a reduction in employees in a certain area? What is that experience like? Or am I leaving because of, hopefully it's not for low performance or, maybe you're not the best fit for IBM, but that's an experience as well too. And in all of those experiences, you want IBMers to feel that they have been heard, that that they are welcomed, and that, that we hope that they understand that there's opportunities, always other opportunities to contribute back to IBM as well too.
So if we think of the employee experience as this holistic end-to-end journey, before they get hired to after they exit the company, there's multiple touch points along the way. You've cited almost all of them, onboarding, recruiting, L&D, performance, all those different touch points. I've talked to a lot of people in smaller companies who have said, oh, we really do well on 1, 2, maybe 3 of them, but there are a whole bunch that we don't do well. How are you able to measure sort of the holistic experience of an employee at IBM, or do you?
We do, and there's a lot of what we call engagement pulse surveys that we do on a either continuous. We do micro surveys. We also do the big annual engagement pulse surveys as well too. And there's a lot of data and insights within that data that we actually read. We look at those scores. We provide those scores also to key people, i.e. managers, as well, to help them understand whether within their business unit, there's, where are you doing well and where are there opportunities to improve then as well too then. And, IBM is very good at, of a level of transparency to help ensure that we are continuously improving engagement. Because engagement is a huge factor in if an employee stays or leaves a company then. And the only way that you can know if your engagement is good is by measuring it and empowering people to help change it as well too then.
I would imagine that there's probably a team or a team of leaders that are sort of responsible for the overall employee experience, and then there's probably owners of each of those touch points in terms of oversight and engaging. How are you able to divide up, the totality of that employee experience to different sponsors, if you will?
So we have key leaders in key areas of those business areas as well too. We've identified them, and we as a employee experience design team, we have direct connection to them, and so we talk to them frequently, and they actually help us. Based off of we have a team, a data analytics team, internal data analytics team that helps bring that data together. And it helps us. They actually have training modules to help us understand how to ask the right questions for data as well too. So instead of us asking for, I need a big pool of data on this, we can actually ask more strategic questions of, do you have insight on this particular type of engagement at IBM? And they can help us pull that data. And so now we're asking more constructive questions around engagement versus big bloated data questions that are really hard to digest and hard to actually make moves on then as well too.
So speaking of engagement, I mean, we've all read the Gallup statistics, right? That 67% of U.S. employees are disengaged at their work. How is design thinking as a methodology, how can it be used to bring a higher level of engagement with employees?
I see design thinking as a way of bringing the employee into helping solve the problems. sometimes what I see, what typically happens, and this is not an IBM thing by any means. I see this happen at a lot of companies, and even within having conversations at conferences of people, describing their experiences, and it's a very, very, top down. Where it's like, I want you to build me this, and the team just goes build it, they deliver it, they put it out in the market. It does good or it does bad, but in that experience, the team is not really involved in assuring, is this the right problem we should be solving? Why are we working on this? What's the end goal? How are we being measured? All those, those meaningful questions to like help a team understand and bring meaning to their work. And so using design thinking, it helps us, one, ask the more strategic questions. What does success look like if we deliver this experience here? How can I bring my subject matter expertise into this experience here as well too? And that's a part of working collaboratively and working together as a team versus I'm going to work on this part of the experience and I'm going to just push it out there and hopefully it works for you all then as well too. And so I think engagement and design thinking helps tremendously in engagement in helping everyone, one, feel that their discipline in their profession matters to the solution then as well too, by helping us all collaborate together then. And for me, even to understand, all right, you're a developer. I want to understand, more about how we can work better together then as well too. And so that design thinking helps us, work better together in that experience then.
What are some of the challenges that you've seen for either leaders or employees that they may have in actually even being willing to embrace design thinking or have a voice in the employee experience? What are some of those pushbacks that you've seen?
Well, the initial one is I don't want to change the way that I'm working. The way that I'm working is fine. I deliver. I get, no one has ever said that the way that I'm working is wrong, and that comes from there's no culture of feedback. One of the things I like the most about design thinking is that having a retrospective after delivering something is a key part of ensuring that what worked, where are areas to improve, where do we have questions, and what are some new ideas then that we can help change those areas as well too. And so a lot of one of the biggest things that we run into is the lack of wanting to change, and it's because they probably never got feedback that the way that you're working is maybe not the best way, or it's causing tension on the team, or it's you're not empathetic to the other disciplines that you're working on the team then. And that type of feedback doesn't come out unless you create an environment that allows that feedback to happen then, and that it's okay. I mean, it needs to be constructive, and it doesn't need to be finger pointing either, but as managers are responsible for ensuring that there is a culture of feedback on a team to help it perform at its best then.
Yeah, I think that just that first step of leadership being aware, there is a problem. Maybe the ways that we've worked for the last 30 years is no longer working. I feel like as the generations get older, you talk about the boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the generation of my kids, they're 11 and 14, that I almost feel like the younger millennial generation is no longer going to tolerate just command and control, hierarchical, just go and do this type of leadership that worked for a long time, but it's not going to work moving forward. So it really behooves us, regardless of what generation we're part of, to embrace this collaborative way, participatory way of designing, a desired outcome. What are some things that you've seen in terms of that generational adoption of this new way of thinking?
I think you just tapped it right there where, there's a generation, and not just the millennial generation, but I think I'm a Gen Xer.
Myself as well.
And so it's like, I think even for our generation as well, too, we have come to a point where we start to ask why.
Yeah, I kind of feel like us as Gen Xers, we just, I feel like the approach for us many times in the past was just suck it up, buttercup. That's just the way it is. Just do it.
Right.
Whereas now we're like, no, we got to speak up.
Right. It's like, I need to understand why you want me to do this. And it's either because of, I just want to understand what you're asking me to do so I can do it at my best and understand why I'm doing it. Or it can be because of, there's of moral value as well too. We see a lot of at different companies where employees are asking, are we really going to take them as a client? Do we really understand how that how that may affect the image of us as a company then as well too? So, employees are asking that. And we don't know if management or leadership are asking those same questions, but if an employee is asking that question, then how do we as the leaders of these companies best respond to those type of situations then? How do we best evaluate, is this the best thing for our company, moving past dollars and cents? Is this the best thing for our company to invest in, to have as a client, to do this type of work then as well too then?
Yeah, I've just, in talking to a lot of design-related firms, a lot of these firms that have been around for a long time, say 20, 30 years, they're led by, say, someone from the boomer generation, and they've achieved success because they were very hard-driving, very... I'll say narcissistic in some ways, because they just, by their sheer will, have made this firm successful. But there have been a lot of casualties along the way, and they're starting to realize that they have to change the way they lead. But it's coming to them to be some sort of an identity crisis, because either one, I don't want to change. Can I change? And if I can't change, does that mean my time is up? It's a very real thing that I'm hearing from some people that are, 30 years into their career, 40 years, they're having to really determine, do I want to invest all that time and energy to make this change, or do I just retire? Right. It's a very interesting dynamic or situation that people are finding themselves in.
It is. It's a really different, I think we're seeing a huge shift in how companies operate, and also, how we get work done as well too, working within, whether it's a large, blue chip company like IBM, or even the smaller places as well too. We have to, really think about, it was a lot of times it was this, let's just get that bid. Right. Let's win that bid. Let's just get the work. But now even, a lot of companies are questioning, should we even bid on that type of work?
Because even if they win it, there may be such a tremendous cost to the team internally, right, to deliver that, what I call sometimes a frothy client experience, that we have to over-deliver, but it's at the cost of our team. We burn them out, and they end up leaving. So if someone is at a firm 6-9 years like you've been, that's a rarity, because there's such a high turnover. I mean, there's so many more questions, Owen, that I'd love to get into, especially on this relationship between employer brand and sometimes what is the actual employee experience, and sometimes there's misalignment there. But I want to thank you for your time. We've been talking to Oen Michael Hammonds, who is the IBM Design Principal for IBM HR. Owen, if people want to learn more about you, where can they go?
So I am pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can look me up.
That's where we found each other.
Yep. So yeah, it's Oen, no W. Pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, and also Dribble, where you see I am still a practicing visual designer.
I've seen your work. I mean, it's amazing. Some of the things you shared on Instagram recently of finding your work being published is amazing.
Thank you. So I'm out there on the social, not as much on Twitter, but on those other platforms.
All right, Owen, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Steve, for having me. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Culture Design Show. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review of the podcast.